never imagined that the worst moment of my life would come after my husband's funeral, not during it. Hello, everyone. My name is Claire Whitman. I'm 35 years old. Let's start the story. For 10 years, I was married to the same man. My high school sweetheart, my best friend, my entire world. His name was Daniel Whitman. Daniel died suddenly from a brain aneurysm on a quiet Tuesday morning in early March. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. One moment he was making coffee, complaining about the news on TV, and the next, he collapsed on our kitchen floor. By the time the paramedics arrived, it was already over. I buried my husband 3 days later. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect. Dark suits, tearful hugs, whispered condolences, casseroles piling up in my refrigerator. People kept telling me how strong I was. I nodded and smiled because that's what widows are supposed to do. Inside, I felt hollow. Daniel and I had no children, not because we didn't want them. We tried for years, but life had other plans. Instead, we built a quiet, steady life together. Sunday breakfasts, road trips across the Midwest, late-night movies on the couch. A love that didn't need to be loud to be real. My younger sister, Melissa, came to the funeral wearing a black dress that was far too tight and heels that clicked loudly against the church floor. She cried dramatically, louder than anyone else, collapsing into my arms as if she had lost a husband instead of a brother-in-law. At the time, I thought grief had simply hit her hard. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the funeral, Melissa invited the family over for a small gathering. She said she wanted us all together to heal and celebrate her pregnancy. She was 7 months along. I almost didn't go. Grief had drained every ounce of energy from me, and the idea of celebrating anything felt wrong. But my parents insisted, saying it would be good for me to get out of the house. So I went. Melissa lived in a rented townhouse on the other side of town. When I arrived, there were cars everywhere. Neighbors, friends I didn't recognize, even a few coworkers of hers I had never met. That should have been my first warning. Inside, the atmosphere felt strange. People were whispering, conversations stopped when I walked into a room. A few people avoided eye contact completely. Others stared at me with a mixture of pity and curiosity. I told myself I was imagining it. Melissa greeted me with a tight smile and a hug that felt rehearsed. Her hand rested protectively on her stomach, her eyes shining with something I couldn't quite place. Excitement, maybe. Or anticipation. We sat in the living room while everyone settled in. Drinks were passed around. Someone turned on music quietly in the background. Then Melissa stood up and clinked a spoon against her glass. I want to thank everyone for coming. I know the past few weeks have been emotional. Her eyes flicked toward me. I also feel like it's time to be honest with all of you. My stomach tightened. I've been keeping a secret. And I can't keep it anymore, not with the baby coming and not after what happened to Daniel. The room went silent. You see, she said slowly, placing both hands on her belly, this baby isn't Mark's. Mark was her on and off again boyfriend, a man who never stayed long enough to unpack a suitcase. This baby, she said, turning fully toward me now, is Daniel's. I swore the air left my lungs. Someone gasped. My mother dropped her napkin. My father stood up halfway from his chair. I didn't move. I know this is shocking, Melissa continued, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. Daniel and I had an affair. It started last year when your marriage was struggling. That was a lie. Daniel and I weren't struggling. We were planning a cruise. He loved me, she said. He wanted to tell you, but he didn't know how, and before he could, he died. My hands were shaking, but not from grief, from disbelief. He knew about the baby, she went on, and he made sure to take care of us. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. He changed his will. She held it up for everyone to see. "This states that half of your house belongs to my child, Daniel's child." Every face in that room turned toward me. I felt something strange rising in my chest. Not panic, not sorrow, something closer to laughter. Because Melissa had made one very big mistake. She had forgotten something about my husband, something that made her entire story impossible. I looked at her calmly. "May I see that?" I asked. She hesitated, then handed it to me. I scanned it quickly. The formatting was wrong, the legal language was sloppy, and the signature, it looked like Daniel's at first glance, but I knew his handwriting better than anyone. It was an imitation. I folded the paper and handed it back. "I'm going to go home now," I said. "That's it?" she asked, confused. "You're not going to say anything?" "Not today," I replied. "This isn't the place." I walked out under the weight of dozens of stares. When I got into my car, I sat there for a full 5 minutes before I started laughing, deep, uncontrollable laughter that turned into tears. Because the truth was simple. Daniel could not be her baby father. 6 years earlier, Daniel had been deployed overseas, not for work, for service. Daniel was a civilian contractor for the Department of Defense. When tensions escalated overseas, he was sent to a secure military base in the Middle East for 11 months. 11 months! No leave, no visits, no exceptions. And during that deployment, something else happened. Daniel underwent emergency surgery after a medical complication, a surgery that made it impossible for him to father children ever again. We never told anyone. Not my parents, not Melissa, not a single soul. The next morning, I called Daniel's attorney, and by the end of the week, I had military records, medical documentation, deployment logs, passport stamps, and sworn statements from commanding officers. I also hired a private investigator. What we uncovered was worse than I imagined. Melissa was drowning in debt. That was the first ugly truth the private investigator uncovered, and it explained far more than I wanted it to. Credit cards maxed out, payday loans, medical bills she had ignored for months, late notices stacked like snowdrifts. Her landlord had already filed eviction paperwork. She had 31 days left before the locks would be changed. 31 days. And she was 7 months pregnant, unemployed, and completely alone. Mark had disappeared as soon as she told him she was expecting. According to the investigator, he'd moved to another state with a woman he met online. No forwarding address, no child support, nothing. Melissa hadn't told anyone, not our parents, not her friends, not even me. Instead, she watched my husband die, and she saw opportunity. The investigator also found text messages between Melissa and 2 of her friends, messages sent weeks before Daniel passed. "If Daniel dies before the baby's born, Claire won't fight me. She'll be too broken," one message read. Another said, "That house is paid off, worth at least $900K. I only need half." I stared at the printed pages until the words blurred. This wasn't desperation alone. This was calculation. Melissa hadn't panicked in the moment. She had planned this, timed it, rehearsed it. She had watched my grief and decided my grief made me weak. She had forgotten who Daniel really was, and she had underestimated who I became when I lost him. I met with Daniel's attorney, Richard Hale, 3 days later. He had represented us for nearly 20 years and had already reviewed the forged will Melissa had presented. "This wouldn't hold up for 5 seconds in court," he said, tapping the page with a pen. "But the accusation itself? That's damaging. Even false claims can poison reputations." "I won't let that happen," I said quietly. Richard nodded. "Daniel made sure you wouldn't have to." He slid a thick folder across the desk. Inside were copies of Daniel's deployment orders, his security clearance documentation, and letters from the Department of Defense confirming his physical location for every day of those 11 months. There were also medical records. Clear, clinical, undeniable. Dates, procedures, prognosis. Richard looked at me carefully. Legally, you're protected, but emotionally, this is going to get messy. I know, I said. That's why I want to confront her before this spreads any further. Record everything, he advised, and don't do it alone. But I did. I invited Melissa to my house the following Sunday afternoon. I told her we needed to talk privately about the will. She arrived wearing a soft sweater and flat shoes, her hair pulled back, her expression humble. She looked like a woman ready to compromise. "It didn't have to come to this," she said as soon as she stepped inside, "but Daniel wanted to do right by his child." I didn't respond. I led her into the living room and gestured for her to sit. A small recorder. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch between us like a taut wire. The recorder's red light blinked steadily, capturing every breath, every shift in her seat. Melissa's eyes darted to it once, then back to me, her humble facade cracking just a fraction. She thought she had me cornered, that my grief had softened me into submission. But grief doesn't always weaken you. Sometimes it forges you into something sharper, something unbreakable. "Melissa," I said, finally, my voice steady, "you're lying." Her eyes widened, but she recovered quickly, letting out a small, disbelieving laugh. "Claire, I know this is hard to hear. Daniel and I—" "Stop." I held up a hand, cutting her off. I reached into the drawer of the coffee table and pulled out the folder Richard had given me. It landed on the table with a soft thud, the weight of truth in every page. "Daniel couldn't have fathered your child. It's impossible." She frowned, leaning forward as if to glance at the folder, but I didn't open it yet. I wanted her to squirm a little longer. "What are you talking about? Of course he could. We were together—" "6 years ago," I interrupted. "Daniel was deployed overseas for 11 months. 11 straight months, Melissa. No leave, no visits home. He was in a secure base in the Middle East, working as a contractor. I have the deployment orders right here." I flipped open the folder and slid the first document toward her, a photocopy of official Department of Defense papers, stamped and signed, with dates that pinned him thousands of miles away during the exact period she would have conceived if her timeline held up. She scanned it, her face paling slightly, but she shook her head. "That doesn't prove anything. Affairs don't happen on a schedule. It could have been before or after." "Before?" I echoed, almost amused at her desperation. "You said it started last year. And after? He died in March, Melissa. You're 7 months pregnant. Do the math." I paused, watching her fingers twitch on her lap. "But that's not even the half of it. During that deployment, Daniel had a medical emergency. Surgery. A complication that left him sterile. Permanently." Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping on dry land. That's not true. You're making this up." I pushed the medical records across the table next, redacted in places for privacy, but clear enough. The date of the surgery, the procedure, a vasectomy-like intervention due to an infection that had spread dangerously, follow-up tests confirming zero viability. We never told anyone, not even Mom and Dad. It was our private pain. We dealt with it together. Tried IVF afterward. It didn't work. Daniel didn't want pity. He wanted us to move forward. Melissa stared at the papers, her hands trembling as she picked one up. This could be forged. Anyone can fake documents." Ironic, coming from you. I nodded toward her forged will she'd brought to her gathering, which I'd kept a copy of. "Your will is a joke, sloppy forgery. Daniel's real attorney already confirmed it. And I have more. Passport stamps, sworn affidavits from his commanding officers, even emails from the base confirming his presence every single day." She dropped the paper, her face flushing red. "Why are you doing this, Claire? I'm your sister. This baby needs a father, a legacy." "This baby needs the truth," I snapped, my calm cracking for the first time. "And Daniel's legacy isn't something you can steal. You planned this, Melissa. I know about the debts, the eviction notice, the texts to your friends about exploiting my grief, how you'd take half the house because I was too broken to fight." Her eyes went wide, genuine fear flashing across her features. "How did you—" "Private investigator," I said simply. "You underestimated me. You thought losing Daniel would destroy me, but it didn't. It reminded me of who he taught me to be: strong, honest, unyielding." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is bullshit, Claire. I'll take this to court. People will believe me. I have witnesses, friends who saw us together." "Friends you paid or threatened?" I stood too, matching her height. "Go ahead, try, but know this: forgery is a crime, fraud is a crime, and slandering a dead man, that's not just legal trouble, that's destroying our family." She backed towards the door, one hand on her belly, the other clutching her purse like a shield. "You wouldn't! Mom and Dad—" "They'll know the truth soon enough." I hit stop on the recorder, the click echoing in the room. "Get out, Melissa, and don't come back until you're ready to apologize, not just to me, to Daniel's memory." She fled, the door slamming behind her. I sank onto the couch, the adrenaline draining from my body, leaving me shaky and exhausted. But for the first time since Daniel's death, I felt a spark of something like hope. Not full healing, not yet, but a step toward it. That evening, I called my parents. They arrived within the hour, their faces etched with worry. Mom hugged me tightly, Dad hovering awkwardly behind her, his usual stoic demeanor cracking at the edges. "We heard from Melissa," Mom said as we sat in the kitchen, cups of tea steaming untouched on the table. "Claire, what's going on?" I laid it all out: the evidence, the investigators' findings, the recording. They listened in stunned silence, Mom's hand covering her mouth, Dad's jaw tightening with each revelation. "Oh, God," Mom whispered when I finished. "How could she?" "Desperation," Dad said gruffly, but his voice held a note of sorrow. "We knew she was struggling, but this is unforgivable." They stayed late into the night, poring over the documents, asking questions, offering support. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in my grief. Daniel had been their son-in-law, but more than that, family. And Melissa's betrayal stung them too. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind of activity. Richard filed paperwork to officially contest the forged will, and I pressed charges for forgery and attempted fraud. The police were involved now, a detective named Sarah Klein taking my statement with professional empathy. "It's solid," she said, reviewing the evidence. "We'll need to interview your sister, but with the texts and the PI's report, this looks like premeditated fraud." Melissa didn't go quietly. She called me repeatedly, leaving voicemails that swung from pleading to furious. "Claire, please drop this for the bleeby's sake." Then, "You're ruining my life. Daniel would hate you for this." I blocked her number. The family gathering she had hosted turned into a ripple of gossip through her small town. Friends reached out, some awkwardly offering condolences again, others outright asking for the truth. I kept my responses brief. "It's a misunderstanding. We're handling it privately." But privacy shattered when Melissa went public. Desperate to salvage her narrative, she posted on social media a tearful video from her townhouse, belly prominently displayed. "My sister is trying to erase my child's father. Daniel Whitman was the love of my life, and now Claire wants to take everything from us because she couldn't give him children." The video went viral in our community. Comments poured in, some supportive of her, others skeptical, a few vicious towards me. "Jealous widow," one called me. "Heartless," said another. It hurt. God, it hurt. Nights when I couldn't sleep, I'd scroll through the hate, tears blurring the screen. Daniel's memory tarnished, our life reduced to tabloid fodder. But I didn't break. Instead, I fought back, quietly, methodically. With Richard's help, I released a statement through a local news outlet, attaching redacted versions of the medical and deployment records. No accusations, just facts. Daniel Whitman could not have fathered this child due to medical reasons from his service overseas. We ask for privacy during this difficult time. The tide turned. Doubts about Melissa's story grew. Her video was dissected online. Inconsistencies pointed out. Friends distanced themselves. Even her landlord, hearing the news, expedited the eviction. A week later, Detective Klein called. "Your sister's in custody. She confessed to forging the will, said she did it out of panic over her finances." Relief washed over me, mingled with pity. What happens now? Charges pending, but with her pregnancy, she'll likely get probation, community service, maybe counseling. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Thank you. Hanging up, I wandered into the backyard, where Daniel and I had spent so many evenings. The garden he tended was overgrown now, weeds choking the flowers. I knelt, pulling them one by one, dirt under my nails grounding me to events. Melissa gave birth 2 months later, a healthy boy she named Ethan. Our parents were there, holding her hand through labor. I didn't go. They brought photos to me afterward. The baby looked nothing like Daniel, dark hair where his had been blonde, eyes a deep brown instead of blue. But he was innocent in all this, a tiny life caught in the crossfire. Mom pleaded with me to visit. "He's your nephew, Claire. Blood." I shook my head. Not yet. Maybe someday. Forgiveness didn't come easy. It took therapy, weekly sessions where I unpacked the layers of grief, betrayal, anger. My therapist, Dr. Ellis, was patient, guiding me through exercises that forced me to confront the void Daniel left and the poison Melissa poured into it. "You don't have to forgive her to heal," Dr. Ellis said one rainy afternoon, "but holding on to hate, that only hurts you." I started small, journaling memories of Daniel, the good ones, untainted by the drama. His laugh, deep and infectious, the way he'd surprise me with wildflowers from roadside ditches, our quiet vows renewed each anniversary over homemade dinners. I volunteered at a veterans support group, sharing Daniel's story, the real one, to help others grieving lost loved ones. It gave purpose to the pain. 6 months after the confrontation, Melissa reached out through our parents. A letter, handwritten, smudged with what might have been tears. "Claire, I'm sorry for everything.